5:04 p.m. on Monday, September 28th. And a number of people still have their volumes, but I'm going to call to order the Education Operations Committee meeting of the Wausau Board of Education. All Wausau School District Board of Education meetings
Is there any way the volume can be increased, please?
will be conducted as a virtual meeting due to an active emergency situation, COVID-19 pandemic, meaning that multiple board members may be participating in the meeting from remote locations through the use of communications technology, and that public access to the meeting may be arranged through the use of technology. Members of the media and public may attend in person by calling 1-415-655-0001, then dial the meeting room access code 133-529-6560, or through the virtual WebEx meeting link posted on the Wausau School District homepage. In the event a passcode is needed, it's not this one, to enter the virtual meeting, it is 1234. All public participants' phones, microphones, and chat dialog boxes will be muted or disabled during the meeting. Members of the public who do not wish to appear in person may email cpec@wausauschools.org with public comment in the subject line. Those messages received prior to the start of the meeting will be provided to the board president. Members of the public who do not wish to appear in person may view the board meeting through the following means. Wausau School Board meetings are streamed live on YouTube. Viewers may visit the site by searching for Wausau School Board YouTube on the YouTube channel. Wausau School Board meetings can also be found on the Vibit the following Thursday. All meetings will also be cablecast on Charter Spectrum Channel 981 at the following times: Mondays at 12 p.m., Wednesdays at 8 a.m., Saturdays at 6 p.m. All meeting access information shall also appear in a prominent location on the Wausau School District website. For those individuals with disabilities, including individuals with visual or hearing impairments, as well as individuals who may have limited access to technology, please contact the Deputy Clerk, Cassie Peck, at 715-261-0505 or cpec@wausauschools.org. Okay, second on the agenda is public and student comment. So we have two forms of public comment. We will have in-person public comment first, followed by recognition of the submitted public comments received by email. Do we have the public comment list, the sign-up sheet? So Lee, your volume needs to be turned on. It's the volume button. No, it's not on.
It's not?
No, I'm not even logged on that one. It's this one. Okay, while we are waiting for the public comment sign-up sheet, I want to review the public participation at board meeting policy. This is policy 167.3. The Board of Education recognizes the value of public comment on educational issues and the importance of allowing members of the public to express themselves on district matters. We will have the following rules shall guide this public comment. Anyone having a legitimate interest in the actions of the board may participate during the public portion of a meeting. Attendees must register their intention to participate in the public portion of the meeting upon their arrival at the meeting. Each statement made by a participant shall be limited to 5 minutes duration. No participant may speak more than once on the same topic at the same meeting. Speakers shall direct all comments to the board and not to staff or other participants. Public comments identifying specific personnel or students by name are not appropriate subjects for presentation to the school board and should be referred to the superintendent's office. Speakers bear the personal risk if anything they say during the public comment period is defamatory, slanderous, or otherwise harmful to another individual. The presiding officer values civil discourse and may interrupt or terminate a speaker's comments when the statement is too lengthy, disruptive, disorderly, threatening, or obscene. The presiding officer may interrupt, warn, or terminate a participant's statement when the statement is too lengthy, personally directed, abusive, obscene, or irrelevant. With that, we'll see who we have for public comment. Clerk Peck, will you be, where will you be for our speakers?
Speakers will be right there.
Okay, they'll be right there, and then,
I forgot the cards, unfortunately.
okay, so when I call your name, please come down here. This is where the speaking will be, where John Uding is, and I'll just ask that you say your name and your address, and Clerk Peck will alert you when you get close to time. So we'll start with, it looks like we have a number of people signed up. We only have 30 minutes for public comment. So we'll start with Melissa Clade.
Good evening, Melissa Clady, 222-510 Buttercup Road, Wausau, Wisconsin, 54401. Good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to be in person and share my thoughts. I'm coming to you tonight as a human resources leader, a past board president for my church, and as a parent. I have written in multiple times and watched the last few board meetings, and tonight it is through my collective experience I offer this perspective. I urge you to keep your hearts and minds open and sincerely work together to find common ground and solutions for our children and our teachers. The Arbinger Institute is a renowned leadership organization which published resources focused on a concept called outward mindset. My organization has built a culture around the use of this approach, and as I evaluated the behavior and culture of the board as demonstrated the last few meetings, it appears this group may benefit from this perspective as you discuss and decide such important matters. So according to Arbinger's website, mindset is how we see the world around us. It's the lens through which we see our work, our relationships, and our world. It is at that foundation of all that we do and shapes how we do it. There are two primary mindsets, internal or inward, the least effective option. In that option, we see others not as people with their own needs and challenges and objectives, but as objects. We see them as vehicles to achieve our own objectives and results, or as obstacles that are in our way or causing problems, or as irrelevancies that can be ignored. During the last board meeting in particular, several board members were so focused on what they wanted that it shut down any true dialogue and desire to find common ground. An example of an inward mindset was putting forth a motion that fully focused on a virtual environment before any discussion was had on the administration's proposal, which attempted to find a solution of choice, balancing in-person and virtual. Contrast that with an outward mindset, where you see others, including each other, as people who matter. You take into account their needs, challenges, and objectives. You focus on collective results. You feel responsible to do your jobs in a way that supports others in doing their jobs. So as board members, what I encourage you to do differently tonight than what I have witnessed in the past few meetings is to listen and respond with an outward mindset, one that is focused first and foremost on the mission of advancing student learning, achievement, and success, and second, focused on the constituents you represent. Please check yourself and literally ask yourself throughout the meeting, am I really hearing the concerns of the kids, parents, teachers, and community members I represent? The belief that is contrary to my own would suggest X. How would I, or how could we, accomplish X, along with my own belief of Y? How can we do both? As a parent of a middle school child who's been a straight-A student and someone who generally takes things in stride, I initially was primarily concerned about the most vulnerable. However, after last week, I'm very much concerned about my own son. He's regularly kicked out of Google Meets classes and misses content and has struggled to regain access. He regularly experiences his Chromebook freezing up, and by the end of Friday, he had 8 missing assignments. By Sunday, he was up to 11. He's stressed out, overwhelmed, and feeling defeated. He's struggling to sleep, he misses his friends, and he needs in-person school opportunities. I urge you to find common ground amongst yourselves as a board and with the families and teachers who responded to the survey. Yes, there is division, but you have the opportunity to offer choice and find solutions that can work for everyone. Your administration has put forth a proposal, and I urge you to accept it as a starting point. It's not ideal in terms of all setup and consequences, but it gets everyone who wants to be back in school an opportunity to do so, and those who want to remain virtual that choice as well. It would allow for teachers who feel they are at most risk to support the virtual environment. You have lost over 400 children based on the decisions and inaction to date. That is enough students to fill 2 elementary schools and provide millions in additional funding to your budget. Please, I urge you, listen with the intention to find solutions and common ground and get our kids back in school. Thank you.
Next we have John Kreischer. Mr. Kreischer, if you will come to the spot here and state your name and address, and you have 5 minutes.
John Kreischer, 151008 Juniper Lane, Wausau, Wisconsin. The new survey results conducted by the Wausau School District should not be surprising. Overwhelmingly, as they were in June, parents are ready to send their children back to school. 75% of the parents, in fact. We are not a vocal minority as a school board and other virtual supporters have portrayed us to be. In fact, it is the 4 that continue to vote for virtual that are in the minority. 433 students. Make it 436, as I took 3 of mine out last week. Have walked away from this district. This attrition will only continue to grow, should deeply trouble the district and all of you as board members. This is millions of dollars walking out the door, speaking with their feet. Look at the districts around you who have successfully executed returning their students to in-person learning, all while managing cases. Just admit that you got it wrong. It's okay to be wrong. My wife thinks I'm wrong half the time anyway as well. It's not okay to be wrong and continue to force your agenda on an entire community. I heard a teacher who said they were on a committee and never met. I've also heard a teacher that said they were on a committee and met for 2 hours. This doesn't sound like proper planning. The schools show no signs of being prepared for schools or for social distancing. No protective measures are in place, which we see in all other schools. What has been done since schools have started virtually? Has any work been done? Why are we waiting to implement these measures? They should already be in place. Why does the district continue to waste time? What was supposed to take 2 weeks somehow is going to take 5 weeks now? As citizens and electors within the district, we have presented to the board information that we felt constituted a conflict of interest and bias on the school board. According to the Wisconsin Association of School Board governing rules, even a perceived conflict of interest would require a board member to abstain from voting or discussing a topic where conflict exists. The concern we presented to the board related to the donors donating to the campaign for Congress of Ms. Zunker, who have also been submitting emails in support for virtual. These individuals have the right, but we feel this is where a conflict of interest comes into play. These donors and supporters of virtual aren't just random electors in the district. Many of them are her friends, Nancy Stencil, Joel Lewis, Kay Grueling. Ms. Grueling, for those in the audience who aren't aware, is an applicant to fill the vacated board seat. Not only is Ms. Grueling a donor for Ms. Zunker's campaign and a supporter for virtual, she is also a $500 sponsor for a fundraising event tomorrow night for the campaign. Kyle Lowe and Jane Roosh continue to publicly promote Ms. Zunker for Congress, which they have the right to do. But you have to see why we as parents in this district find all of this to be a bit shady. And let's talk about the conduct and professionalism of board members. I think everyone in the audience and this community would agree that our elected officials should conduct themselves with professionalism, integrity, and objectivity, right? Board members are welcome to conduct themselves in public however they see fit. It says something, though, about their professionalism or lack thereof when they post comments like this on Facebook. For those of you in the audience that don't know this acronym, it means I don't give a F what people think about me.
Decorum.
And again, not a crime, but it helps paint the picture, doesn't it? If they conduct themselves publicly in this manner, what can we expect as members of a distinguished school board? This type of character has no business being anywhere near a school board. School board members are supposed to remain apolitical, objective, and impartial. I'm merely shedding light on a situation so we can understand why we find ourselves as the only school district in Marathon County to be 100% virtual. This board, while supposedly trying to protect the community, has wreaked more havoc and caused more devastation than they could have possibly imagined. The child neglect, hunger, physical abuse, sexual abuse, substance abuse, financial loss, job loss of insurance, suffering of special education students, deterioration in academics, anxiety, depression, suicidal thoughts, and the pain that this board has caused and continues to cause is incomprehensible. It should be criminal. It's not. I hope this board stands up tonight for what is right and what is just and thinks closely about the students, families who are suffering in this district. The integrity and respect for this board within the community is in shambles. I hope you will fight to restore it tonight.
I had called for our next Amanda Witz. Ms. Witz, if you could say your name and address for the record, please. You have 5 minutes.
My name is Amanda Witz, and I live at 154938 Wild Rose Lane in Wausau, Wisconsin. This is my first board meeting that I've ever been at. My main one concern tonight is my daughter. I am sick and tired of having to work 16-hour shifts, come home, be up until 2 o'clock in the morning with my daughter, who is so behind because she cannot understand any of the virtual learning that you guys provided. I've gone through 2 iPads, and it's only been, 3-4 weeks into the school. She's continuously kicked out of her iPad. I just got notified today after working a 16-hour shift that she has to redo 20 assignments. No, my daughter will not be punished and have to redo assignments because you guys chose that you do not want to open our school districts. I used to work for you guys. I know how you work. You guys think about yourselves and you don't think about the safety or the cares of the children's education. All you think about is yourselves. And it is time that we put an end to it, and as parents, stick up for our children because they need it the most, not you guys. And I'm done.
Next we have Bruce Grau. Mr. Grau, you could stand over here and state your name and address for the record, and you have 5 minutes, please.
I'm Bruce Grau. I'm from 1115 North 10th Street here in Wausau. I messed up. I sent an email to you and I'm doing this, so I don't know what I'm doing. But anyway, I'm a member of the Unitarian Universalist Multiracial Council and the new Poor People's Campaign. I wanted to speak briefly about the need for equitable representation of working people and active engagement within our community with the Wausau School Board. We have before us in November a ballot item to decide yay and or nay on a 2-part referendum affecting 8,000 students and their families, most of whom are working class. Yet this multi-million-dollar, primarily worker-funded recommendation was developed by a secretive group of people through a process not even known to the school board members. They find no minutes to their meetings. They can't identify who exactly was on this task force. This behind closed door proposal will totally disrupt a vital presence of community and support for a very multiracial and income challenged part of our community. In a city that ranks 383rd in the state for income, they weren't asked. Where poverty rate for every racial group exceeds that of Milwaukee, they were not asked. Where single women with children under 5, of whom over 75% live in poverty in Wausau, they were not asked. And at the very least, this is taxation without representation. Top-down decision-making is business as usual, and it maintains the status quo. But that also perpetually hurts the people who are impacted the most. I'm in the new Poor People's Campaign. Many may have heard of us. We're kind of taking on the baton of Martin Luther King's Poor People's Campaign. Basically, we bring working people together. It's a very multiracial organization to denounce the immorality of inequality. We have 3 of our 4 basic principles. First of all, when you lift from the bottom, everybody rises. Everybody must be in and nobody must be out. And those most impacted should be actively engaged and take the lead in decisions affecting their community. So if you members of the Wausau School Board agree with these principles, you'll break with business as usual. You'll seek active engagement with working people through town halls, at churches, community centers, areas where working people live and gather and work. It's being done already in the city. Look at District Number 3. Surveys, petitions, pronouncements on TV, they all look good, but they still do not engage the majority of working people in this city. It's a campaign we have to engage. You'll implement a policy of total transparency and do your due diligence by investigating how this undercover task force originated. And you'll develop a policy of equity for working people of Wausau that states no final major decision is made until you've exhausted every channel to reach and engage the working class families of our 8,000 students here in Wausau. Now lastly, as a healthcare provider, I support virtual schools. I have COVID in my face every day. I also support the need and understand and appreciate the need that families have hardships based on this decision. And that's where I would like to see the school board concentrate their activities to support the hardworking families in this city so that we can have a safe and high-quality education at the same time within this limitations that we have. Equity for working people through active engagement, due diligence, and transparency will help hurt these hurtful events that have been occurring recently. So thank you for your time and consideration.
Next we have Peter Fuchs.
Say that again, please.
Peter Fuchs?
Yeah.
F-U-C, oh, okay. Making his way. And while he's coming down his way, I would like to remind everybody that the Wausau Board of Education has adopted a mask policy, which includes covering your nose fully. So if you are, to the extent that you are able to abide by that in this room to help us reduce the spread of contagion, it is greatly appreciated and the adopted policy. Mr. Fuchs, if you could state your name and address for the record, please. You have 5 minutes.
Peter Fuchs, 142627 County Road L, Merrill, Wisconsin. We are in the Wausau School District, though. So, like Bruce, actually, I actually signed up on the wrong list. I thought this was an attendance thing, so thankfully, accidentally, I was inspired by some of the comments. First, I'd like to pay you a comment. This is a pretty contentious situation, and I appreciate the directness that you are paying attention to the person that's speaking. So a compliment to you and some of the other board members as well. That said, we'll differ in opinion from here. I, like many of the others, share the same concerns. There are 3 children at home. We live in Merrill, Wisconsin, so you can guess that we're pretty much on the perimeter of the school district. We struggle with, like many others, with connectivity. We have 3 that struggle with connectivity. So my wife took a snapshot of our last speed test, and it was 0.6 megabits per second. So you can imagine there's 0 chance, so 0 chance for success there. We had a health scare at home where I had to quarantine this week, and I personally experienced what they went through because I was on the same network. I was not able to function. It is flat out that way. And I like to think I'm pretty good with computers. I've been around them for a long, long time. I could not function, and I would fail miserably at my job. Okay, fail is, it's not even close. It's not possible. So, that said, so we are the only one in Marathon County that is virtual only. Okay, so something on the board that I would like you to elaborate on is what drove you to that position when all of the other evidence is hopefully equally shared amongst the other school districts? What's different about us? How did we get to where we got to, where we're the only one? Maybe you guys, somebody else mentioned got it wrong. Maybe you guys got it right. I don't know, and I don't know that we'll ever know that answer, and it might change. But what is different about us? Presumably, at both an administrator and school board level, I'm hoping you collaborated with other school districts and shared best practices and interests and reports and CDC this and that. What's different? Why are we the only ones? And I'd ask you to reconsider that when you go through this process tonight. Thank you very much.
Next we have Sammy Reel.
I'm right here. Hold on.
And just so we can save time, the next person will be Amanda Bauman. So be aware that you are on deck. Ms. Reel, if you could state your name and address, and you have 5 minutes.
Samantha Reilly, 154925 Wild Rose Lane, Wausau, Wisconsin. Hello, my name is Sammy Reilly, an 8th grader horseman. And while I may be standing here on my own, I am here to represent a large group of kids that find themselves struggling on account of virtual learning. Much like myself, kids have been placed in an atmosphere in which they have no other option but to be forced into a virtual setting. Kids with special needs, kids that learn tactfully, and kids who need a social atmosphere are left standing in a situation of difficulty. I myself was a straight-A student, one of the students in highest honors, but now I'm just barely passing in some classes. Though, knowing the percentages of the last survey given out to parents in the district, I am now aware I am not alone. We are not a minority. At least 76% of parents responded that they would send their kid to an in-person school, full-time or half-time. As a school board, you represent the community, including that 76%. In your recent survey, a question was asked to the staff what challenges students are experiencing in Plan C. You are asking teachers who have never met me before to be my voice, when they have only seen me behind a screen. And not one of those questions were how we were dealing emotionally. Virtual schooling has always been an option. In previous years, it has always been presented to kids who thrive in a virtual setting. Programs like WAVE introduced that option to students who didn't do well in an in-person environment. But unlike our current situations, students then had a choice. We stand here today, we have no choice. Our school district has trapped us in a virtual setting that may benefit some kids, but not others. One size does not fit all. Our voices have not been heard. Kids sit in silence behind a Chromebook, struggling to comprehend their assignments or configure a way to learn when some are already occupied by siblings or other distractions at home. Home is not a classroom. Home does not nurture student learning. Home does not create an engaging environment with interactive tasks or learning. Many claim that this year would be different from spring, that students would have an option to do activities away from their computer. Instead, students are expected to sit in front of a screen for 8 hours a day, partaking in calls as they fail to tackle their classwork, and as teachers struggle with technology. When the school board voted to implement virtual learning, I was under the impression that you would do what was in the best interest of us. But now, as I witness schools around me opening up and allowing students inside their doors to better their education, I have begun to realize the people placed in charge of my education. My friends from Merrill and DC Everest have been allowed a real first day of school, but look at us. Schools around the district have students in classrooms learning and receiving the curriculum that all students should be receiving, but it raises one question. While other students are gaining pathway to the education they need, why is the Wausau School District neglecting the kids left behind? The Wausau School District's mission statement is to advance student learning, achievement, and success. I am not achieving, I am not succeeding. Students around me are not achieving, and students around me are not succeeding. It is your job as a school district to adapt and overcome situations to better develop and advance through troublesome times. You are leaders in children's lives and should be aiming for preparations to overcome the problems that you are faced. Schools around us have thought out and implemented procedures to deal with COVID-19. What have you done? When there were school shootings, you implemented lockdown and ALICE drills. But now, every time a problem is introduced, you surrender yet again to virtual learning. In conclusion, I would like to honor a passage from Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, quote, if you want to be professional, you will do something outside of yourself, something to repair tears in your community, something to make life a little better for the people less fortunate than you. That's what I think a meaningful life is, living not for oneself, but for one's community, unquote. As you board members vote today, I want each of you to think of why you are truly here. Are you here for the better of our community, or are you here for your own personal gain? I am not blind to the situation happening. Although being 13 years old, I am consciously aware of the upcoming election. While I have stressed over schooling, I believed I was failing myself, my teachers, and my parents. But rather, you are the ones failing me. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Amanda Baumann. I live at 603 Excel Drive in Wausau, Wisconsin. And I want to send you all thoughts of encouragement as these are not easy decisions. Thank you for taking the steps that have allowed us to meet today. The opportunity to have an open dialogue about tough decisions is not just to assist you as board members, it also helps other parents of the school district. There are multiple views on this topic, multiple solutions, and these discussions help everyone, both parents and school board members alike, to make fully well thought out considerations. So thank you very much. I sent you several emails now, and I continue as we talk today through our next voting session to urge you to continue looking beyond simple positive COVID case numbers and really dig into the research on the topic. As a parent of a child in the Wausau School District, my head reels with concerns, both for opening and for staying virtual. It is a hard balance. There is no doubt about that. But despite my reservations for opening, recent research has led me to believe that the cons of remaining closed significantly outweigh the current narrative that is being perpetuated. As the media drives fear deeper into the hearts of our families, I was struck by the percentage of parents ready to send their children back to face-to-face instruction. Per your June survey, 85% of families surveyed were willing, and now per your current survey, anywhere between 72 and 78% are willing, depending on the developmental levels. On July 23rd, I sent the school board a recent article authored by the CDC just days before your July 27th decision. And it encouraged our schools to consider the possible destruction of mental health and safety that occurs during long-term school closures. The American Association of Pediatrics also outlines the steps necessary for reopening, as well as the potential harmful impacts of remaining closed. And these are such important documents to understand, not just as a school board, but as parents of the Wausau School District. It's so important to understand these documents. Anybody who wants to take a look at the documents, I sent an email. It should be in public comments in the agenda. You can see the CDC link and the American Association of Pediatrics link. Take some time, do some reading. As I read through these articles, a few major bullet points pop out at me, and I quote from the CDC: persistent achievement gaps that already existed before COVID-19, such as disparities across income levels. We talked about that today. And races can worsen and cause serious, hard to repair damage to children's education. Remote learning makes absorbing information more difficult for students with developmental delays or other cognitive disabilities. CDC goes on to quote, extended school closures are harmful to children's development of social and emotional skills. Further, a review of studies conducted on pandemics found a strong association between the length of quarantine and post-traumatic stress disorder syndrome, avoidance behavior, and anger. Further quoting the CDC, extended school closures deprive children who live in unsafe homes and neighborhoods of such an important layer of protection from neglect, as well as physical, sexual, and emotional maltreatment and abuse. The American Association of Pediatrics states, the AAP, and they have it bold on their website, strongly advocates that all policy considerations for the coming school year should start with a goal of having students physically present in the schools. The CDC and the American Association of Pediatrics officially endorses the considerable issues with keeping children isolated. And the CDC continues on with their quote of, school closure disrupts the delivery of in-person instruction and critical services to children and families, which has negative individual and societal ramifications. I know that there are many parents out there that truly struggle to understand why some parents are pushing so heavily for in-person learning. Understanding the repercussions of remaining closed helps us all to remain balanced. These are hard conversations. We need to hear all sides. We are battling more than just a virus here. We are also considering the long-term impacts that isolation may have on child development and society as a whole. Public health includes child development. When we say aloud that our primary goal is to keep our kids safe, it is very important to understand that this means more than simply from the COVID-19 virus. It is much more complex than that. Thank you.
Board members, we're at 30 minutes of public comment. We still have 5 individuals that are listed. 3 are listed as topic in-person school. 2 are listed as topic virtual school. We have a number of other work to get to on this agenda before the 6 p.m. meeting, including addressing the substitute teacher issue and the Marathon County Health Department presentation. It looks like we will not have time to address the policy review before the 6 p.m. meeting. Per the policy, we permit 30 minutes of public comment unless a board member moves to extend that. That's the policy. And again, we have 5 comments left and other work to do before 6 p.m.
Which agenda item is more important than hearing from the public?
So moved.
I would say we table the health department information. I'd prefer to hear the other 5.
Well, somebody needs to make a motion then.
I motion that we table the health department information so we can hear from the last 5 speakers.
Are we able to have health department? Oh no, it's on this agenda. Okay.
We may need to reconvene after the annual meeting.
Yes.
Okay.
Adjourn this meeting, reconvene after.
Okay, so we need a motion to extend public comment. We don't need to worry about agenda, but let's just a motion.
We have a first from Jim.
Okay.
Second from Pat.
I'll second it.
Okay. So we have a motion to extend public comment with the first by Jim and a second by Pat. Is that correct?
And then you said that we can hear the health department report and do the substitute teaching thing after the annual meeting? We can
I
reconvene.
can't speak for the health department.
Okay.
We'll have to reach out to them and see if they're available.
Okay.
Okay, that's the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Okay, so this is the remaining lineup. It will be Corey Seilers, followed by Sarah Ruffey, followed by Kelly Stiles, followed by Julie Carell, followed by Joe Bamey. All right, Mr. Seilers, please state your name and address for the record, please, and you have 5 minutes.
My name is Corey Sillers. I live at 223565 County Road, KK, Conroy Mountain. I have an 8th grader at John Muir, 11th grader here at West. Both of my children have shown significant challenges with the virtual learning. Their grades have suffered and both need the class structure to get back to where they were academically before the pandemic occurred. So I am extremely supportive of going back to school in person. Since others have stated the number, 436 students have transferred, I'm wondering how this loss of funding has impacted our Wausau budget and what adjustments have been made so far to accomplish that, make up for those things. My mother attended Rim Mountain Elementary School in 1958 when it was brand new. My brother and I attended that school as well. And now my children both attended there as well. I was a pivotal parent in rebuilding the Rim Mountain Elementary School playground with over a $14,000 donation in time, material, and equipment, along with the excellent support of the other parents at Rim Mountain Elementary. I am obviously a strong supporter of the students in this district. I volunteered to build 11 benches for the tennis courts here at Wausau West because I was tired of seeing my daughter and the other girls sit on the ground. I am also currently working with the tech ed instructors to build an additional bench project for down the center column. I did this because I wanted to, not because I was asked to. And I think Wausau has a lot of other good people that do the same as me, and I'm not alone in this. And I know I'm only talking to half of the board in essence, but I'm talking to all of you. Please don't wreck our district anymore than you did with the decisions you already made.
Next is Sarah Ruffey. After Ms. Ruffey will be Kelly Stiles.
Good evening, my name is Sarah Ruffey. I live at 154313 Dallas Lane in the town of Texas. I have 4 children, one of whom is lucky enough to go to school in person because he goes to St. Francis in Merrill, and he has 2 brothers who are here at West that are incredibly jealous. Since we live out in the country, similar to the other gentleman who said they have 0 access to internet capabilities, my children also have 0 access at home. Despite we've tried the Wi-Fi or MiFi from the school and we appreciate that, however, they couldn't get logged on. So now I have children at my office to go to school with Chromebooks that are freezing up. I had one child miss classes so that he could loan his Chromebook to his brother to take a test since it was open for a small window. And we were promised that the virtual program this fall would be better than what we had in the spring. And we were promised that they would have 2 live sessions per class per week that they needed to attend. Imagine my surprise when my sophomore comes into me at my office and I said, I thought you're supposed to be in school, in class. And he goes, well, I just got done talking to my teacher. I hopped on a little late and class was already done. And this was 10 minutes into the mod. I said, what do you mean class was already done? Well, they hop on, they take attendance, tell us what to do, and then we're done. That is not teaching from my standpoint. I have a junior who is practically ready to give up, especially in chemistry, because he doesn't understand it. He goes, Mom, I can't learn this on my own. Quite frankly, I couldn't learn chemistry on my own either. I said, well, ask your teacher. But they don't teach us, Mom. We need to be in school. I beg you, please consider what's in the best interest of our kids, because quite frankly, I think we are failing this generation of kids through the virtual program. I agree there are kids that excel at it. My 3 kids that are still in school all did virtual school for 1 year. And that happened to be the year before last. And I think they got a great education, but all 3 of them asked to go back to school. Imagine their heartbreak when they went back to school only to be kicked back into the virtual world when the pandemic hit and everything was shut down. Please, there are plenty of schools all over this country that have figured out ways to get our kids back to school. Let Wausau School District be one of them. Thank you.
Next up, we have Kelly Stiles, followed by Julie Carell. We do have to stop at 6 p.m. Because we do have to convene the annual school district meeting. We do have three speakers. While you are entitled to 5 minutes, in the event we can get all 3 done in the 10 minutes, we don't have to postpone that last public comment.
Hi, Kelly Stiles. I live at 3246 North 8th Street, Wausau, Wisconsin. I'm here on behalf of my senior son. He goes to school at Wausau East. And I almost feel guilty because having a senior, I feel like I can't complain compared to those people that have young children, kindergartners, first graders, those people who are trying to engage their kids online. I feel like it's very difficult. And before I get started, I should say thank you. Thanks for listening. Thanks for having us here. We appreciate it. I am going to try to keep it short. I think John covered most of the points that you guys have heard over and over. Kids that are getting left behind, they need emotional support, mental support, missing out on technology problems, internet access. Kids that are left behind, they're left alone at home, they're abused, they're missing out on meals. Parents are struggling. I've seen parents that have had to change jobs so that they can work with their kids at school at home, so they're not left alone. And young children with the engagement online. I think, to get a kindergartner to sit and look at a computer all morning is just not realistic. I think we're losing kids. One thing I haven't heard mentioned tonight that I think is important for the board to hear again is the percent of hospitalizations and deaths among young kids is so minuscule. And I realize that we have some concerns with our teachers and that population, but I think that that can be controlled if we have teachers who are concerned and who have immune suppressed systems. I encourage you to have those teachers work with the students who choose the virtual option. I think that is a way to win. And have the other teachers work with the 75% of kids that want to go to school. I will leave you with this. It's my understanding that the board members are elected by the constituents. You've had 2 surveys by your constituents telling you overwhelmingly that the kids want to go to school and the parents want the kids to go to school. Please represent your constituents and not your wishes.
My name is Julie Carell. My address is 717 Steuben Street, Wausau, Wisconsin. I am a retired Wausau School District elementary teacher. I had 19 years of experience and several years more of that as an elementary substitute teacher. However, right now I am an assistant home educator of my kindergarten grandchild. He is a virtual kindergartner. Every Monday and Wednesday from 8:30 to 3:30, I, along with my husband, assist in the education of my grandchild, Arlo. He's a quiet boy. He's very introverted, kindergarten student. I will have to tell you that I have kindergarten teaching experience, but nothing prepared me for this. When I taught kindergarten, I found that these little ones learn best in an atmosphere of fun, playful, hands-on learning activities. They learn best in a community of learners. They learn best by sharing in the learning. They watch their friends. They learn by trying, by failing, but by trying again. But now I see my grandson Arlo having to take his little left hand and type in his Google Meet access code. And then he watches a video while others join in. And then when the session begins, his teacher, who is awesome, tries to include everyone in the learning, but who knows who is learning and what they're learning? A teacher asks a question, Arlo raises his hand to answer, but maybe it's not perfectly captured in the screen. His frustration is seen by his grandma, but not by his teacher. She has already called on someone else and is trying to interact with that one student in that Google Meet. And the meeting goes on with certain hands raised and certain learners called upon to unmute, and this goes on in every Google meeting. So I looked at the Wausau School District website and I see that it is stated, our mission to advance student learning, achievement, and success. Student learning happens best in a community of learners. Students achieve and succeed when they are challenged and encouraged in relationship with their teachers and their peers. You know that. This has been Wausau's strength throughout the years. On a side note, our 3 children graduated from Wausau East High School, each after 12 years of excellent in-person learning experiences. Please don't tell us that this is the best that we can do for our young people, the young people of our community. Open up the schools for our young people and their families, and then we can advance their learning, their achievement, and their success. Thank you.
Mr. Baum, feel free to take the full 5. Well, I think we'll be okay if we start at 6:03.
My name is Joe Babe, 227531 Boulder Ridge Circle, Wausau. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. I'll be frank. It's been a tough hour listening to a lot of emotion from this group of people. Mr. Sillers, who I have not yet met, but I'll shake his hand at some point soon, I think captured the sense of community for Wausau. As a man who's fully dedicated to the community, giving of himself to improve facilities for his kids and for the kids of the community. And you could hear the emotion in his voice because he's not happy. And he shouldn't be happy. We're failing. The board represents the community. We put you here. Collectively, It's not going well. Dr. Hiltz, respectively, virtual learning sucks. And you know it. It's not your core competency. The staff's core competency is to fill this building, this beautiful building, and use it to educate kids. We're not doing that. We've chosen a suboptimal path for our most important resource. We should have spent every waking moment since the schools were closed last March figuring out how to make it work with kids in the schools. We didn't do it. The board needs to figure it out. And some of the board members ought to look in the mirror and question the decisions they've made. Thank you.
Okay, so at this time, we are noticed for the 6 o'clock annual meeting of the school district. So I am going to put forward a motion to suspend the Education Operations Committee meeting and then resume it after the conclusion of the annual district meeting. And when we resume that motion, assuming the motion passes, when we resume that meeting, we'll discuss what from that agenda we will move to a future agenda.
I'll second. Bruce? Thank you. That helps.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. We will suspend the Education Operations Committee meeting. We will resume it after the annual school district meeting has concluded. Okay, I am seeking a motion to reconvene in the Education Operations Committee meeting.
So moved.
Okay, it's a first by Lee Webster. Second by Beth Martin. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. We are reconvening the Education Operations Committee meeting. We have a couple of matters to address and some things that will probably move off of this agenda. The first is that public comment. We still haven't actually done the submitted public comment, so I'm going to state those very quickly. Should we postpone that though and move the Marathon County Health Department up since we had?
Are they ready?
Yeah, I just emailed her and asked her. She should be ready.
Do any board members have any objections to allowing the health department, since we were delayed, and this is their window of availability, to allowing that agenda item to move forward? I don't believe we need a motion on it. We'll just do that.
Yeah, mm-hmm.
Okay.
We can approve minutes now.
Okay, so while we're waiting, let's approve the minutes. Yeah, because the remainder of the public comment is going to take a minute to get through. Okay, so agenda item 3. This was the approving the minutes from the August 24th, 2020 meeting. So I am seeking a motion to approve the minutes of August 24th, 2020.
So moved.
Okay, that's a first from Beth Martin.
Second.
Second from Lance Trollope. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Those meeting minutes are approved. Okay, and it sounds like the presentation is ready. So we are going to move to agenda item 4.
You have to bring the presentation up, Kathy.
Is Kathy planning on sharing the presentation? Perfect. Am I okay to start?
Yep, go ahead, Amanda.
Okay. So my name is Amanda Ostrowski. I'm a public health educator with Marathon County Health Department. I am the county's school liaison, working with schools across the county to get them ready for reopening to in-person students. As I share this presentation with you this evening, I do want to draw your attention that this data was retrieved yesterday. There are some slides that we were able to get the data from today. So just as you go through this, please keep in mind to check the time period in which you're viewing the data. Next slide, please. So I'd like to start with our daily case increase. This is a question that we get a lot, and it's part of our daily dashboard to the community. You will notice that we are in what we call a surge right now. We are accruing daily increases in cases in which we once had on a weekly basis. So this specific slide goes through Thursday the 24th. However, on the 25th, we had 41 cases. Saturday, the 26th, we had our largest increase in cases, which was 78 cases total for the day, 68 on Sunday, and today we had 54 new cases. Next slide, please. This information here was requested at the last meeting. This is the Census Tract data for what we would consider an active period. So an active infection is roughly equated to about 14 days. So this is the time period from September 13th through the 26th. You will see the shaded green rows are census tracts that make up the Wausau School District. Keep in mind when you're viewing this data that this is for all residents within your census tract. For those of you who are interested, this information is now available on our website. And you can do it, the state website used to have it for cumulative. We have broken it down for county residents by cumulative as well as active. So that's on our county dashboard site. You'll also see here that there are cells that have the number 1 through 4. Per Wisconsin DHS, we are not able to release the exact number of infection or death if it is less than 4. So we have to keep that in there for confidentiality purposes. Next slide, please. This information was also talked about at your last school board meeting. So this is de-identified school data. So we have been able to track through the last 5 weeks positive COVID cases that come in that start within a school or are linked to within a school. So you'll notice in the second column that it is titled Number of School Systems with Positive Cases. So this would mean the Wausau School District would count as a system. And we have several several private schools that they would have one building that is a school system. So I just want to help you to understand that it is not by district or by building, this is by school system. So currently for the past week, we have 9 school systems that have positive cases, at least one positive case. We have 36 cases within the schools in the past week. And then in the columns that follow are the number of close contacts in quarantine because of the positive case in the school. So currently, because an infection, you're quarantined for 2 weeks, we currently have 369 students across the county that are in quarantine because of an exposure at school. And what's important about that is if a student is in quarantine because, let's say their mom has it or grandpa in Lincoln County has it and they were exposed to them, those numbers aren't part of this. These numbers are tied to exposure in school. So what that looks like in the bigger picture, from September 13th through the 26th, 10% of cases in our entire county are tied to schools. We're currently at 453 cases in the past 2 weeks. It's also important to note right now that schools are currently being asked to conduct contact notification in order to free up health department resources to notify the other 90% of the positive cases and the contact notifications. So as you can see, schools are just a portion of what is happening within our larger community. Next slide, please. So we are often asked, what does the health department look at when we're trying to determine what mitigation strategies to employ? We currently look at 3 activity level sources. The first is the Harvard Global Health Initiative, in which we are ranked high. Marathon County is ranked high. They update their ranking every day. If you're interested, you can just Google the Harvard Global Health Initiative and zoom right into Marathon County. We also watch the Wisconsin Department of Health Services activity level, which is based upon the burden of the disease as well as the trajectory of the disease. That activity level is released weekly. We are currently in high, and we've been in high since June 24th. And CDC recently released indicators for schools, and according to their activity level, we are also ranked high. So we look at those 3 activity levels. We also consider our local testing capabilities. Right now, we are classified as strained. So when we talk about testing capabilities, we're looking at who is able to be tested. Is it only healthcare workers? Is it only EMS? Are they testing only symptomatic residents, or are they also testing close contacts? We also look at how long does it take for a county resident from the time they request to be tested to the actual time that they get tested, as well as the time from when that test is done to the time that it results. All 3 of those factors, who is able to get tested, how long they have to wait for a test, and how long until it results, are what we look at to determine where our testing capability is. We then also look at contact tracing. So right now you'll see that our contact tracing is poor. This includes the time periods for when the disease investigation happens. We want that to happen within 24 hours that we're notified of a positive case. So if I have COVID, we want to notify myself of that within 24 hours of getting the call from the physician's office that I'm positive. Contact notification is also part of that. We want to be able to notify close contacts within 48 hours of that positive test result. And the third part of that is our ability to do isolation and quarantine checks. So ideally, if we were not in a surge, we would be calling every day to those who test positive as well as their close contacts. And the purpose of that is to monitor what is happening with the disease for the person who is sick, and helping a person who's in quarantine to really watch for when those, if those symptoms were developed, to get them to be tested as soon as possible. And the last thing that we look at for schools is acute respiratory illness. So right now we're in good condition for that. And what that really looks at is a school's baseline compared to the prior year. What level of illness are you seeing in sending children home with acute respiratory illness? Next slide, please. So when we look at these metrics, we then compare them to the mitigation strategies that we currently have for COVID-19. So you may have heard of some of these already. The first one is student cohorting. So the idea of student cohorting is that you put them in a group in order to limit the contact between other students and staff. And these strategies work by keeping the students together over the course of a predetermined period of time. So the longer you can keep the students together, the better off you are in terms of reducing disease transmission. So it also helps by reducing the contact with shared surfaces, and also allows us to work with the schools more quickly when we need to do contact tracing with a positive case. And if that positive cases identified, it also allows for targeted testing, quarantine, or isolation of a single cohort rather than having the entire student body needing to quarantine if there's a positive case. The next mitigation strategy is physical distancing. To date, this is the best prevention strategy that we had. If we are able to keep people 6 feet apart, the risk of transmission reduces greatly. So in working with schools, that is the #1 thing that we stress. If at all possible, get that 6 feet of social distancing between kids. Masking, so whenever you are indoors or in an enclosed space and other people are present in the same room, making sure that masks cover the nose and mouth. And it's important to note that at this point in time, CDC does not recommend the use of gaiters. The 4th mitigation strategy is the sibling exclusion policy. This is outlined in the DHS document for schools returning to in-person instruction. And it's the theory that if my son gets sent down to the nurse's office and has 2 COVID symptoms, at that time when he is sent home, my other son also must go home. And they may return when the symptomatic son has a negative COVID test, an alternate diagnosis, or if I choose not to test the symptomatic child, it's 10 days from the onset of symptoms, and that they have an improvement of symptoms, and that they're fever-free without medication for 24 hours. What that means for my second son, however, is that he would have to remain quarantined for 14 days past the symptomatic son's isolation period. The purpose of this is to keep sickness out of schools. We do not want to have a situation where we have infection traveling between school and community to a point where we cannot mitigate or suppress that. The next mitigation strategy is the suspension of sports and extracurricular activities. So the theory behind this is that if you have an outbreak or cases within your school that you cannot mitigate and you cannot control, when you bring kids together in sports and extracurriculars, you are essentially mixing cohorts. And it really negates what you've been doing all day long and all the hard work that the teachers and staff put into maintaining cohorts and socially distancing. So that would be a mitigation strategy to consider. The next one is partial virtual learning for selective grades. And that ties in with the full-time virtual learning for a building or a district. So the last 2 strategies can be used, for instance, if there's not enough staff or students to continue on operationally in person, or as a reset period of time to allow ill children and those in quarantine to return to in-person at the same time. Next slide, please. So what you see there in the yellow orangish color are the current mitigation strategies as recommended by the Marathon County Health Officer. Today, she did add the 5th one of temporarily suspending sports and extracurriculars. It's important to remember that these are recommendations. They are not requirements, but these are what are to believe need to happen in order to keep our children in school in person for the longest period of time. Next slide, please. So things that school districts are to consider in terms of prevention and control strategies for mitigating COVID, looking at the transportation to and from school, we do have evidence of exposures on school buses within the county, so making sure that you follow the transportation guidelines from DPI, getting as few kids on the bus as possible, seating arrangements where they are, being able to track a student throughout the day so that if we would need to contact trace, it takes less resource both for the health department and for the school. Maintaining daily logs of students and staff to determine who they are within the school building, especially if you have staff that travel between school buildings. Maintaining and reporting respiratory-like symptoms. This is really important even if you are in a virtual learning environment, because it will allow you to determine do you have enough students to be able to move back into in-person education. Also preparing lists and communications to parents prior to the outbreak occurring. DHS and DPI recommend that school systems are very transparent with their parents and community of when an active case occurs, and so that those communications are not only timely but also accurate. And also notifying students and parents and staff to quarantine. So, like I mentioned before, contact notification is currently falling to the schools within Marathon County because of the surge that is occurring. We would not be able to notify students and students' parents that they should be in quarantine in a timely enough fashion. So that is something that the school nursing staff is assuming throughout the entire county, and it's something that districts need to be prepared for because it is not a small undertaking. And then also keeping students and staff quarantined, really sticking to that 14 days, because the 14 days isn't just a number that's picked out for quarantine. It's really, quarantines are based off of the biology of the virus. And so with COVID-19, there is evidence that infection can develop up until that 14-day mark, which is why maintaining your quarantine periods for your staff and your students, even though it is incredibly difficult and inconvenient at times, is so important to keeping COVID-19 under control. Next slide, please. And I just wanted to end with this slide. It is not the sole responsibility of a school to get kids back and keep them back. We all need to watch our distance, wear a mask, wash our hands, and stay home if we're sick. Parents can also play a part in packing lunches for your kids, transporting them to school on your own if you are able, and keep exposure points outside of school to a minimum. We are really in a crisis mode right now with the number of active infections that we have, and there's no evidence that it will be slowing down. However, we also know that there are many other districts within the county that are bringing their kids back to school. And so it's going to take the effort of all of us to get our kids back into the four walls of a school and to keep them there for as long as possible. So I went through that very quickly. I'm being conscious of time, but I can take questions if anybody has any.
Board member questions? No. These questions are limited to board members asking questions. The annual district meeting has concluded. We're back in a school board meeting now. Are there questions from the school board?
I do have a question.
Okay.
Amanda, can you hear me?
I think, could you unmute yourself?
Can you hear me, Amanda? Okay, so my question is, when you call, or when the school calls to tell kids that they need to go into quarantine, is that voluntary, or do they take a list and then those kids are not admitted to school until the end of their quarantine period? How does that work within the school?
So the schools are operating under the jurisdiction of the health department in order to quarantine. It is not considered voluntary. They would have to wait their 14 days quarantine period. And so it's just a person other than the health department calling, because we cannot get to people fast enough in order to keep them out of school.
I have a question.
Can you unmute yourself?
Yeah, Amanda. I've heard that from some sources that well over 90% of the people who experience the COVID virus are either asymptomatic or have very minimal symptoms over a short period of time. and that the ones that are most likely to be hospitalized are people that are over 65 with other symptomatology. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah.
Directly to the numbers that you used, but I can tell you that in general, the older you are, the more severe symptoms you have, and the more likely you are to be hospitalized. That being said, what we are concerned about is the more people you have within your community that are positive with COVID-19, whether they're asymptomatic or not, they can spread that illness just as if they had symptoms. And so what the health department and Wisconsin Department of Health Services are watching very closely is that we do not want an asymptomatic or a child with very few symptoms to then take that and infect somebody who is more likely to have more severe consequences. And that is a possibility. And so that's why we need to control the spread within a school so carefully, is so that it doesn't leak out into the rest of our community.
Other board member questions for Amanda?
Can I ask another one?
Absolutely.
Amanda, can you give us a read of what things are like in the hospital situation right now in our region?
So I don't want to speak too much on behalf of the hospitals because I don't know the most up-to-date numbers, but I do know that we are surging. We are hospitalizing more residents. You may have seen the press conference from Aspires last week. If not, you can find it at different various sources on the internet. Our hospitals are filling up, and it is something that we are paying attention to.
It's very good.
And that's really why I ended the presentation with, it takes all of us. We all need to be practicing these prevention measures to pull our community out of the surge of COVID-19 infections.
Are we waiting for 0% before we go back to school?
The questions will be asked by the board. We need members of the public to observe decorum in this meeting. This is a meeting of the school board. The public comment period has concluded.
We pay your salary.
Are there other questions for Amanda?
Our children.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Jim.
Okay. Let me unmute myself first. Amanda, I'm looking at the Wisconsin Hospital Association data. Do you use this data? Because it's been very helpful in looking at the cases per county, also looking at the bed count, according to what they have here, the total amount of beds in the state of Wisconsin. Do you look at this?
Yes, our health officer looks at it daily.
And how do you perceive that data?
As far as accuracy, or?
Well, I'm just asking, how do you, as an official, perceive the data that the Wisconsin Hospital Association is putting out there in relevance to us here in Marathon County?
So we look at the Wisconsin Department of Health Services website. You can look at our county or you can look at our region for what's called a HERC. We watch that as well. I guess, James, I'm a little confused on your question about how we, as it pertains to our situation, we take information from our regional HERC to determine what our hospital bed capacity looks like. And so that is something that we rely on our healthcare partners in order to strategize solutions on how to mitigate that piece of it. But it is a piece of information that the health officer uses when she's assigning mitigation strategies for the community.
And that's basically what I'm asking you, is because I'd like to be looking at the same data that you're using, so we as board members can take a look at what's going on.
So if you're asking, do we utilize the Wisconsin Hospital Association data? Yes, we do. It is one piece in compilation with several that I've listed.
Other board member questions for Amanda?
I have one more.
Sure.
Amanda, in addition to things that we've heard a million times, wearing a mask, social distancing, staying home if you're ill, what other kinds of things can our community do, or people in our community do, to get the amount of disease, the level down so that we aren't surging?
So one thing that we have noticed, when we looked at our last surge in July, with the positive cases, the number of close contacts that somebody would have was 6, 8, 10 close contacts. What we're seeing now is people have 37 or 42 close contacts. Sometimes they cannot name the people that they were within 6 feet of. And so, as much as we all want to act in a normal manner, we have to remember that we can't do that yet. And so that social distancing and avoiding large gatherings is really, really important right now, because the more close contacts you have, the higher your risk of disease transmission, and the more it taxes all of our systems. It taxes the health department's ability to respond. It taxes the school system in terms of the amount of kids that you have out in quarantine, or the staff that you have available to come to work. It taxes our employers with their workforce. And so that is the biggest thing we can do right now, is to maintain our social distance by avoiding large gatherings.
Tricia, I have one.
Oh, go ahead.
I think I've got this right.
Yeah.
Amanda, you shared the absolute numbers of students and staff that have been impacted or affected by COVID across the county. I'm interested to know, what is the denominator for each of those groups? Out of how many students do those numbers represent, and how many staff members?
I don't have that information for you. You could do that in Wausau for your district if you would wish. You know, your administration team has the number of teachers and students
No, I
that
guess
would be isolated and quarantined because of a school exposure.
what I'm interested in is to understand how much we could expect to see by moving in the direction, you know, such as a recommendation that may come forward tonight. It would be nice to know that we would expect to see X percent of students or Y percent of staff to help us plan accordingly.
So your Dr. Hiltz or Andrew may have that information. We wouldn't be able to compile that information for you to get all of the staff from every school building within the county.
Okay, I guess if a school is reporting a number of cases, they can't tell you how many students they have?
Yeah, we have current information.
It's not something that we've collected up until this point.
Okay.
Did you hear Angie?
Thank you. I did not.
Okay, Angie, can you repeat that, please?
Sure, I have the number of students and staff that we currently have, that currently right now have a positive case, and how many staff and students we have quarantined.
Okay.
So we have 10 staff and students who currently are COVID positive. There are some who are recovered, and there are currently 115 students and staff in quarantine.
Angie, I couldn't hear you. Can you speak up? Yeah.
John will yell it. He's got a lot of voice.
We have 10 students and staff that are total active cases right now in the district. We have 115 students and staff that are quarantined.
Out of what?
Out of roughly 1,000 staff members and 8,000 students.
Okay. Do we have more questions for Amanda?
I have another one.
Okay, Lee?
Amanda, I think I've asked this before, but one of my concerns is that I realize that you're overwhelmed with all the things that you're doing around the physical disease. And yet I'm still waiting. I'm seeing articles from groups like the Psychiatrist Steering Committee, from CDRAP, a number of other organizations that are talking about significant increases in depression, suicide rates, anxiety, mental health hospitalizations, those sorts of things. And somehow it seems to me that we're taking a single focus. Are you collecting any more data around those kinds of other incidences, including child abuse, family breakup, those kinds of issues?
So we're typically not the department that collects that type of information. And we do watch it through sources like the Wisconsin Youth Risk Behavior Survey, and things like that. We do know the importance of kids being in school, and we support kids being in school as long as the district is able to implement those mitigation strategies that were outlined on the slides. We, at a local level, I don't know if we will have that information in a timely enough fashion for that to factor into your decision. However, we do know that we have community partners that are talking about the hardships in what they're seeing, whether that's the mental health counselors that go into the public or go into the school districts within the county, and some other community partners like United Way and things like that. So we are aware that the hardships, the stories are definitely following the same pattern of what's been talked about in the national studies, but I don't know that we will have that local data available soon.
Thank you.
Other questions for Amanda? I think that's all the questions that we have. Thank you, Amanda. I think that's all the questions that we have. We appreciate that your flexibility with the schedule tonight. Okay, so that was the fourth item on the agenda. We should address here what probably is going to move off the agenda. Neola policy review.
We can move that.
Unless there's any burning desire for that to say, we will move that to the Education Operations Committee for next month. So we will leave on the referendum planning update and the substitute pay rates. We do still have the public comments. It has been practiced, but not in policy, that I have stated public comments with one name and sentence on those comments. That is not in policy. Since we did extend public comment tonight, I'm going to ask that Clerk Peck redact the comments to remove email addresses and any sensitive information and post it on the district website. So submitted public comments will be available within the next few days under today's date on the wausauschools.org website. If you go to where the agenda is posted for Education Operations Committee meeting, there will be a link that says extras, and you can see all written submitted public comment. Okay, moving to referendum planning update.
Sure. Cassie, do you have that short presentation?
Oh, I forgot to unmute all that.
Please make sure you unmute.
Will do. Are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Just wanted to give a few notes about the referendum. it's interesting, I hear from people about concerns about communication. So we thought tonight we would just share with the board what has been done in terms of communication. Clearly, we did not have successful communication with the families of Lincoln and Grant. We recognize that. We did reach out in a number of ways, and you'll see some of that tonight. Could you go forward? This isn't though. I'm sorry.
This is the whole slideshow.
What's that?
This is the entire slideshow.
Oh, this is the whole thing.
Do you want to print something else?
That one right there. This is just a graphic that shares the communication that's occurred since 2015. And frankly, I have to look up here to see it. So you can see that there's been a number of in-person discussions on the far left column. Between listening sessions, strategic planning sessions, those all occurred with community and staff. Those all led to the development of our strategic plan. This referendum was developed to support a number of those strategic goals. As we move down on the in-person interactions, again, we had the listening sessions that were held. The ideation sessions, we had 10 ideation sessions, which included roughly 200 students, staff, and community. 2 of those were for high school students specifically. And that all informed the development of this referendum proposal. And then obviously, we've had ongoing conversations here at the board level, face-to-face. Could you go back to the top, Cassie? We did a number of surveys. You can see that in 2015, we had a referendum survey that was mailed to every household. You can see the number of responses that were received. We do annual school perception surveys of both staff and parents. That information informs the development of this proposal. We did have 9 online discussions. During COVID, it made it more difficult to interact with people in person. And so we created a thought exchange. We didn't create it. We utilized a crowdsourcing platform called Thought Exchange so that we could actually interact with staff and community online to explore ideas about this referendum. I thought that was a pretty creative way to reach out to people, and everybody had access to that.
Steve, can I ask you something?
Yes, please.
About the original surveys that went out, those went out also in Hmong and Spanish, did they not?
They went what?
They went out in Hmong and Spanish.
Correct,
did they not?
yes, absolutely. Question was, did the surveys go out in Hmong and Spanish? And yes, we do that. We also call, when we know they're, building level staff call families to try and increase that outreach. And then to the right, if you go back to the top, Cassie. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed one at the bottom, sorry. We also did surveys of principals to determine the status of their buildings in terms of education. And then lastly, phone surveys. Fall of 2019, we've done 3 phone surveys that reached roughly 400 members of the community, in each survey. Those were demographically representative by gender, by location within the city, by financial status as much as could be determined. So those were there. And then, let's see, and then summer 2020, that was the last survey. So those are the 3 surveys. And then, so roughly 1,200 conversations, at an average of, I think, 6 to 10 minutes, that really explored these, the referendum proposals. So while we did fail, we tried to reach out during the task force to find families from every school, frankly. We invited 60 people. 40 said they were going to attend in this task force group. 20 ended up showing up. And so we worked with the 20 who came in, and they helped us flesh out that referendum proposal. So the conversations have been varied. They've been over a number of years. And what I'm hearing now, and I understand the concerns about making decisions for people without adequate input. I will own that fact. What I'm not hearing anybody say is that it's a bad plan. So I know the process had a flaw, but I think the plan is solid. So anyway, I just wanted the board and you, since you're here, to know that there has been extensive communication over multiple years in multiple venues. Is that the only slide I've got, Cassie?
School facilities.
Oh, yeah, this, there were some people who were asking questions about the phone survey methodology. I'll leave that here for people's reference if you're interested in that. I don't think, Bob, do you see any reason to go through that? Next one, Cassie. Oh, and then this is a little information from the WASB for roles that both staff and board members can and cannot play in terms of referendum communication. And I think that was it, wasn't it?
Some of the referendum presentations we're doing is in the next.
Oh, yes, we've got a number of PTO presentations. Most of the social service groups are not meeting right now, so that makes it more difficult. Those that are virtual, and we are attending a number of those. Mrs. White, our communications director, she's setting up a number of those. And here is a short list of people we'll be interacting with in the next month and a half. So, questions about any of that information? Jane?
Well, I know that from online and from talking to people, there was some confusion about Montessori going into the Lincoln building. And there was a perception that that was a tuition school, so that we would be putting this elite school into this building that would not be available to the people that lived around it. And that is so not true.
Right.
It would actually make it available to where people, because right now you have to provide your own transportation to charter schools. And this would put it in their neighborhood, and they could make use of it, where it's
Absolutely.
very difficult right now.
Yeah, Montessori is a free school, just like any other school in our district. It just happens to be a charter school that is overseen in part by a charter council, and it has a specific educational model, but it is free. Thank you.
Dr. Hiltz, I have a question for you. Is there a plan to change the way we pick members for task forces? Is there a plan in place to change that?
You know, I think the plan to identify members of the task force was good. We had about 200 people who were in these ideation sessions, and that really formed the basis for the creation of this plan. And so we targeted mainly those folks. You know, we certainly could have opened it up more, but frankly, as you see, we had a number of opportunities for community-wide conversation. I think the error was when we didn't get information from, or residents from Lincoln and Grant, which actually we had one from Lincoln. But and frankly, we didn't go into this thinking that we were going to propose to merge Lincoln and Grant. You know, our first proposal was, let's do a reconstruction. And by the time we were, you know, to that point, you know, we were well on our, we had done a lot of work with the task force, and frankly, we had a deadline to get the proposal to the board. So I think moving forward, yes, we can be more conscious of that. I think, and I also, you know, recognize the role that COVID played in trying to get families to engage. But yes.
Okay, so there will be a different process in the future for task forces.
Yes, what we've learned from this is we want to be more specific in our, you know, communication to people who are affected.
Okay, great. And also, one of the things that I had a problem with was that there were no meeting minutes that were taken during these task force meetings. Is that going to change? Will there be meeting minutes taken?
I don't know. I mean, I've worked with our task force before. This is not a public meeting. There's no requirement. It's not a committee of the board. If it were a committee of the board, there'd be a requirement to have minutes. This was basically a subcommittee of mine. And you know, I don't take minutes for our administrative meetings that are published. So I don't think that task force meeting minutes, I don't think I would, you know, create and publish those.
Well, even if those aren't published, I would like them to be taken so that they are available for school board members to look at. Because the one thing that I have an issue with is that if we are spending taxpayer money, then there should be meeting minutes that are taken so that we can go back and take a look at what those decisions were so that we can see how those decisions were made.
Noted, thank you.
May I just weigh in on that? Because we'd had this discussion at a previous meeting, and then Jim did reach out with Wisconsin Association of School Boards and found some information which he may want to weigh in on. But I think to that point also, though, to the extent that Clerk Lowe, she serves as clerk, if she's available to attend those meetings, would that be possible that she could take those notes?
If we had school board members as a part of those committees, we could. We haven't to this point.
Okay.
That would be an option we could discuss in the future.
Okay.
We did in our last referendum.
Board members, can you please make sure you unmute yourself when you're talking, because I'm getting texts that viewers at home are not able to hear you, and I can't keep up who's talking to mic and unmic people.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry.
So if I may weigh in, President Zucker, about the fact that Ms. Lowe, what I had found from the WAS, they sent back that it's not a common practice, but if you were so wanting that, that would be up to the superintendent to do that. Just to let you know that most subcommittees don't usually keep minutes like we do here.
Well, one of the reasons they don't keep minutes is because minutes say what was done at a meeting. They don't say what was said at a meeting. So the minutes of a committee meeting would be, we met to discuss whatever the project was. Some minutes talk about motions and what was acted on and done at a meeting. They're not notes or a recording of everything that was said at the meeting. So we get the presentation, the result of the meeting is presented to the board. Here were our findings, this is what we looked at, and that's presented to the board, and that, of course, is something that we all have to hear. But the minutes themselves, I don't know if they would serve a great purpose, because they just would say what was done. But I mean, that's certainly something that can be discussed at a later date when we actually have the next time that this comes around. But
Well, I would definitely agree. I would definitely make myself available to take notes. And so, you know, this is the one argument that's kind of what is being argued against the referendum, is that there are no notes for this task force. And so we don't know who is at these task force meetings and who and what actions happened at the task force meetings. They give us recommendations and advice on how to go forward with the referendums. And if we as elected officials are not accountable for taxpayers' money, then how can we argue that, you know, what we are doing is right and correct? We are not being transparent. And so that is the only thing that I'm asking, is that these task force members, you know, be listed on these meeting minutes, and that we have meeting minutes available, at least for school board members. So I think that is something that we can accomplish, that is something we can do, so that in the future, if we are talking about referendums, if we are talking about spending taxpayer money, then we can go back to these minutes and say, you know, this is how the decision was made.
I understood. Thank you. I do want to be careful with the word not being transparent. I mean, as Mr. Trollope mentioned, the work that the committee did and the advice was presented to the board in an open meeting, and the board voted on that. Very transparent. I understand that the work behind the scenes was not, which is pretty common in this case. So I understand what you're looking for, and we can certainly consider that as we move forward.
All right, are there any other questions for Dr. Hiltz on the referendum planning update? All right, thank you. I think we have one last agenda item here. So we're again postponing Neola updates until next month's EdOps. Thanks everybody for preparing that exhaustive policy review. And we'll go to agenda item 7, substitute pay rates. This is an action item.
This is Mrs. Gundram, our HR director. She'll present this.
I'm assuming, is my mic
Your mic
right?
is on.
Okay, good. Hi, everyone. My name is Tabitha Gundram. I'm the Director of Human Resources, and it is lovely to see all of you other than just on a screen for the first time since I started July 1st. I am coming to you tonight as I included in the board packet information to request a modification on a temporary basis to our substitute teaching rates. I've included information in the packet in terms of why. In brief summary, due to pandemic, we are finding an increasingly difficult time getting our substitutes to be willing to come into our schools. The districts around us have done some modifications to their pay rates to allow substitutes to receive the long-term sub rate even for daily assignments. Some have gone so far as to require substitutes to sign agreements that prevent them from subbing in any other district but their own. And so in an effort to try to be as competitive and attractive to the same people that we share with some of those other districts, I am moving forward asking that we pay the long-term sub rates temporarily during our pandemic time when we have substitutes that are coming in to fill in for our teachers. I will just tell you up front, currently during the virtual learning, we have been approving and allowing work from home as much as possible when people are in quarantine. As we transition to in-person learning, which that's later in the other meeting, and we talk about that, as that transition happens at whatever point in time, we will continue to do a balance between possible work from home where we can accommodate that to keep our own teachers in front of our students. But there are going to be times when we need to have substitutes. We have had some staff who have been impacted to the point where they are unable to work even now because of symptoms and things that they are dealing with. So we need a balance of both. And so that's what I'm asking tonight, and I believe the draft motion is included in the items that I presented.
All right, I have two questions, one for Tabitha and one for Bob. The first question is, are we already experiencing that that sub shortage? And the second question is for Bob. This board had to take action that was a very tough decision in May and final action in June as it relates to the salary freeze. Is the funding that we have to approve, can you just touch on that? Because I'm concerned about how this is going to be perceived given the action that we had to take earlier this year as a result of this pandemic.
So the answer is yes, we have a significant shortage of substitutes. We have been continually trying to recruit. In a district of our size, we probably should be maintaining a teacher sub pool of around 250 teachers, would be my advice. We are sitting at only about 107 right now because of those that we have lost to other districts and those that have indicated that they're not comfortable subbing during pandemic. So we have a significantly lower supply. As for the budget, I can touch just briefly and then Bob can follow up. Due to our ability to allow teachers to work from home, at least in the current time frame, we have spent significantly less substitute dollars so far this year. And I would hope, I'm envisioning that that's going to continue because we are also not running professional development where we're pulling teachers out of school in order to have them plug into those things and other kinds of things that as a district we naturally created substitute need. A number of those items have been set aside for maybe a later time, and so we're not expending those dollars, and so they can be repurposed in this way, and I'll let Bob address anything additional on that.
Sure, I just want to acknowledge, yes, we are freezing salaries for the year for now. We're waiting on a budget repair bill, and if the budget repair bill were not to come, we could take that action up again. It's similar to the way we are giving all of our employees an average of $700 in one-time money. This would essentially be one-time money. This is an increase in sub rates for 1 year. Pandemic is done, sub rates go back to what they were. So in a sense, it's one-time money also, and you've heard me say before that one-time money spends a lot easier than recurring money, right? Because then your budget goes back to what we call normal the following year.
And just to follow up, there might be other questions, but if we weren't to do this and we have a harder time finding subs, it could make it more difficult on the teachers that are in buildings. And that we hear stories about how they have to try to be creative, and I don't see how that might happen with safe social distancing practices. So it's to everybody's benefit that we have these substitutes.
I got a question. Your recommendation
Can
or
you
your...
unmute, Pat?
I got him.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Cassie. We should have 250, we have 107. How confident are you that going to the long-term sub rate is going to close a gap of about 60%?
I don't think it's necessarily going to close the gap of the 60% of the missing subs from our list. What I think it's going to do is attract the 107 to continue to be willing to come here versus going to Merrill or going to DC Everest or going to any of the other districts in our area. So what I'm trying to do is make us an equal attraction to them, because I do know that many of our subs would prefer to sub here, but if they're given a choice of a job in the morning that's here at $128 and there at $200 a day, which one would you pick? And that's the struggle that I'm up against. And so I'm trying to level the playing field for us so that we don't have yet again another thing that we're challenged with.
No, and exactly what you said is my concern. I don't want us to necessarily be equal, because when we talk about bringing kids back into school, the last thing I want to hear is, oops, now we're back in school and we don't have people qualified to sit in front of the students. And I don't know that we should be so concerned about, again, being on a level playing field. We need to be a step up, not just from a quantity, but also from a quality perspective. So I don't want to hamper you guys and say, oh, you can only go to here. To me, during this time, you guys should do what you need to do within some reason in order to pull the right levers to get the people in the door that we need.
So my response to that, if you're looking for that, is I think our long-term sub rate is a competitive rate, and I think it will do just that, although I am always open for the board to give us the ability to make that modification as needed going forward without having to come back, as long as we do that within reason within the budget. But that's like your comfort level, not something that I would put on the table initially.
Keith, I don't know what you guys need. I'm just saying I would rather not have you come back with a mother may I go up another $5 because we're missing, 40 subs or whatever it is. Yeah. Just do what needs to be done and get the people in the door.
What's our current rate, our long-term rate?
Long-term rate is 200 and, I didn't bring that right with me.
230?
I think it's around 230.
I mean, the board is willing to approve 250, and we would start at 230 and kind of see what we're getting. We would welcome the flexibility.
Well, we always get into a bidding war. I mean, I don't want to get outbid by these other districts anymore.
Yeah. Well, and that's part of the issue. We raise ours, they raise theirs. Well, it's that kind of a market. Mm-hmm. So, and we also leverage relationships with them. A lot of them like to be in our schools, and so if you want to go 250, we would certainly welcome that. We would go with the 230 and see what happens.
Okay.
Sorry, I probably didn't unmute. Oh, you did. Thank you.
Okay, I don't know if there's other questions, but I think that we could move forward with a motion to recommend to the full board the approval of the temporary adjustment of substitute rates to be equivalent to $250 during the pandemic, with administration starting at the long-term substitute rate and seeing if the need for flexibility is necessary.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, that was a first by Pat McKee and a second by Jim Boucher. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries 8-0. With that, I am seeking, thank you very much. With that, I'm seeking a motion to adjourn.
Second.
We have a first from Beth Martin, a second from Pat McKee. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. This meeting is adjourned.